Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Down, face down. You know the routine.
Hello, my name is Sati Gossett, and welcome to another episode of Pan and Zoom, where we talk to creatives about being creative. Now, today is a wonderful special guest, Charlese Antointette. She is a wardrobe stylist for TV and film and all the things in between. Welcome to the show, Charlese.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me.
Well, here on Pan and Zoom, what we do is we like to talk about, artists and their craft, how they got into it, what was the spark that led them to the path that they're on now. So tell us about your moment where it's like, hey, I got to do costume design.
I think it was realizing that two things I really love, which were films and fashion, could converge into a career. And I think the very first example I had of that was reading about Ruth Carter when I believe I was like a teenager, maybe even younger than that, honestly. It was around the time she did Malcolm X, so it was the 90s. So reading about Ruth Carter, and she was like 27 years old when she did that film. And I didn't realize that was a career that Black people did, Black women did, and also for her to be so young, it was very aspirational and very cool. So when I learned about her, I was like, wow, this is something that is interesting to me, but it didn't feel attainable until I moved to New York. And when I moved to New York, there was a lot of projects filming. New York had a great tax incentive at that time. And so productions were booming in New York. And so there would be trucks on the street that said wardrobe on them. And it sparked an idea in my head. It was like, oh, I just need to get on one of these trucks so I can work on a film. And from there, I just annoyed people until someone gave me an internship.
And where was that internship?
So the first film I interned on was an independent film, actually. It was called Solitary Man, and it was starring Michael Douglas, Susan Sarandon, and Danny DeVito. The costume designers were Ellen Marajnik and Jenny Gehring. And so I was an unpaid intern. This is when you could still have unpaid interns. So I was an unpaid intern for them, and it was really cool. Because prior to that, I had been doing some styling work in New York as an assistant and also on my own. So it was cool just to learn the methodology of how you work on a film and apply a lot of those similar skills to working there. But if I didn't have that opportunity, I would never be able to break into film.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Can you describe that methodology? Because film is such a collaborative process. You have it starts with a script. The director has their vision. They bring in the actors. Like, how involved from project to project is with what you do?
Mm-hmm. What I do is very involved. I'm one of the first people that gets hired, usually after the production designer. So I get the script, I break down the script, I have initial meetings with the director or showrunner if it's a TV show, producers, and I talk through how I see the characters and what I think the characters should be wearing scene by scene. And you will have initial conversations first with some visual aids, like I'll have presentation, sketches, swatches, whatever I need to convey the ideas that I have for these specific characters. And a lot of what we also do through costuming is we track a character's journey from the beginning to the story to the end. So, if it's an epic film where a character goes through a lot and they go on an epic journey and they have battles, like you should see that reflected in their clothing. They might start off pristine and clean, and then by the end of the movie, they're a little beat up. They're tattered or they're bloody, or they walk through a fire, so they're singed and they're smoky. So a lot of that initial ideation happens when I read the script, and those notes are put into spreadsheets for my team. Sketches, like I said, swatches, and also oftentimes I'm one of the first people that the actors actually see to talk about character. And it's not that they don't have conversations with the director. A lot of times we're filming everywhere. So a lot of those conversations are like remote on Zoom, over the phone. And actors tell me like, this is the first time I'm really wrapping my brain around getting into character because now I'm putting on the clothing. So I have a huge hand in like helping these actors build the character because once they get in the costume, they start really feeling like these characters.
Yeah, because like you alluded to Ruth Carter and Malcolm X and some of those costumes, especially the red
Yeah.
and the zoot suits.
Yeah.
You know, that's like, certain films, TV shows, clothing is iconic, and they turn in Halloween costumes for some people. And it's kind of cool that you have a like small hand in that you could be changing the culture, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, I think costume designers have a big hand in that. And I think, it's being more recognized now because of social media, because you can follow us and you can see our work. That's how you found me was, through social media, me talking about my work and like, and just my experiences, as an artist and as a creative, right? So I think it's becoming more known how much of a hand we have in creating these iconic characters and these iconic looks. And I think it's really fun because I also am a lover of costume design and film. So I'm also one of the people looking for who costume designed that, like I'm still that person too. So I do love that part of where we are in the world presently in terms of the accessibility to artists and art. Yeah.
Have you had a chance to meet Ruth Carter?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
I've met her several times. I've called her for advice, very familiar with her.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And, considering this new wave of films with people of color, and you work with people like Shaka King and Nikhil, she did Nanny. I'm mispronouncing her name.
Nikyatu.
It's coming more to the forefront, these different Afro-fusion styles. I saw that you went to Africa.
Yeah, I just filmed in I just finished filming in Cape Town, but I've also spent time in Nigeria as well. Yeah.
So how much of that do you imbue into your work?
Oh, I mean, I think it has a huge influence on, who I am being a member of the diaspora, the African diaspora, growing up the way I did, in a multicultural diasporic, DMV, DC, suburban Maryland. I grew up with people from
Chocolate City for everyone.
Chocolate City, the DMV, for people who know. I grew up with people from all over the diaspora, from Caribbean folks, African folks, Black Americans. I'm Black American, but I embrace the diaspora because, we all come from Africa at the end of the day. So Afrofuturism is a huge love of mine. Afrofuturism has its roots in funk and jazz, with Sun Ra. So it's our stuff. So anytime I get to explore Afrofuturist themes in films and even Black Power themes or Black liberation themes, I'm really excited to be able to lend my hand to those stories.
Mm-hmm. And you worked on Judas and the Black Messiah, yes?
Yes, I costume designed Judas and the Black Messiah.
That's fantastic. And that was nominated for several awards.
Yeah, it ended up winning an Oscar for Best Supporting and also Best Song, and got nominated for a bunch of other awards, including at the Oscars. But I got nominated for a Costume Designers Guild Award for that film, which was epic for me because.
But you got into the Academy too.
I did. I did get into the Academy because of that film.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's worth it alone to me. Getting the screeners and stuff. My dad used to get the screeners. I used to love this.
Well, they're not sending the physical ones.
No, they're doing
it's all digital now.
It's all digital now.
It's an app.
It's an app. But I just think it's great that your work has brought you into that space.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm putting it out there here on Pan and Zoom. Future Oscar winner, Charlese Antoinette. So when you win, remember where you heard it first.
Thank you. I received that. I receive it, and it would be really cool. I mean, it's not why I do the work that I do, but it would be a huge honor.
That's my feeling about it. I'm not
I receive it.
Sideshow charlatan. But back to the work. Yes. So you also worked on Air.
I did.
And you worked with like Viola and Chris Tucker and Jason Bateman and Matt Damon. You worked with Matt Damon a couple times.
Yes. So I've worked with, on Air, I worked with Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Viola Davis, Marlon Wayans as well. who's awesome, and he's just had a movie come out, which I can't wait to see. I think I think Marlon's an amazing actor. I mean, all the actors on that project are amazing, but I was excited, and Chris Tucker, because it was one of his first movies in years. So it was a great group of people. Jason Bateman. I mean, and I love working with Matt and Ben. Like, they have been so supportive of me in my career. So I'm really grateful every time I get to work with them.
And kind of like Black Messiah, Air, it was kind of, because it kind of takes place in the past, so you have to kind of refer to, like, what did they wear back then? Specifically, I feel like I'm jumping around, but with Black Messiah, you have to be historically accurate. How do you source finding the materials for that authenticity?
It's a layered approach. For Judas and the Black Messiah, we were me and my team were sourcing clothes from all over the United States, LA, Cleveland, where we shot, Chicago, New York, Atlanta, like any place that had dead stock 60s. I was buying it, we were pulling it, renting it. And what I ended up doing on that project, because we had very little prep time, was just gathered as much clothing as I could from the era, and we built out a closet, basically. Men's, women's, kids, and also the closets were built out according to my sketches and my mood boards, so there were specific items and call outs on my boards and on the sketches. And then we also had to build some things for them to be historically accurate or, fit the story. So for example, Lakeith wears this trench coat in the opening of the film. There's a scene where he like runs over a car escaping, and that trench coat was not actually period accurate. We built it for movement for camera. So as it's like flapping behind him in the wind, the trench coats of that length didn't really come into play until the 70s. In the 60s, they were hip length. But in the 70s, you start seeing the much longer, like, shaft, like,
the type. There's going to be that one person in the audience, and that ain't right.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I love telling this story because I know there is that one person. And I'm like, no, that's intentional. Like we did that on purpose because it needed to be a cinematic moment of him running and jumping across that car. And it's beautiful. Like the coat just does this thing. And we painstakingly found the right, fabric that would move, tested it, it's for movement. So, and people don't realize how much work goes into one garment. Like we were sourcing fabric again from LA, New York.
Because sometimes you have to have like multiple of the same garment.
Yes.
Like you said earlier, depending on the arc of the character, in the beginning it's pristine, by the end it's weathered. You have to account for that. Yeah,
and you have to track the changes along the way. So you'll have like, change one, garment one that's clean, and then, change one, garment two will have a little blood on it, and then 3 will have a little blood and some rips. 4, and you just track the changes, and that's why like you have to be really good at continuity doing what we do, because you have to know which sweater is coming into play at which moment, because we never shoot in order.
Right.
So
it's very rare that you shoot in order.
I've never worked on a project where we shot in order.
The movie The Long Walk, which came out, they shot that actually in. It was like the first time they did that. They're talking about that.
That sounds like a dream.
But in the past, continuity, they had their Polaroid cameras. Now you can just do it with your iPhone, and
everything's digital.
See it on real time.
If you have service. So here's the thing. A lot of times when I shot in Africa, some places we didn't have service. So it's hard to if you're in a place that has service and you're tracking continuity in real time, and there's an app we use called Sync on Set. So you're uploading the photos in real time so people can see it. And if you don't have service, how are you going to do that? I kind of wish we still had Polaroids in those moments.
Everything's cyclical, so it may come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just the onset, because I know it's a lot of hurry up and wait. Working with continuity. Do you work with storyboard sometimes?
No, I usually get the storyboards, and that helps to inform me about what the costume needs to do in a particular scene.
Okay.
So it'll help me with my design process, or it'll call some things out that I need to maybe modify about the design, but I'm not really involved in the actual storyboarding. I will sometimes provide sketches for, boarding purposes if they want to drop people and environments or whatever, but I don't really have a hand in storyboarding at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a naive question, but when you're brought on, you're allocated a budget, right, to source everything?
Yes. So I have a budget that I get for sourcing, designing materials. Usually get a separate labor budget. But at the end of the day, it's all counted as one budget. But they usually separate it for our purposes, so we have a clear bottom line of like what we can actually spend on producing the costumes.
Yeah, I only ask because for the viewer at home, they ask, well, where do they get the money from?
Yes,
and so
we are allocated a budget, and you are not ever supposed to go over that budget.
Yeah, they can be sticklers. Just
oh yeah, especially the studios,
because it's unfortunate, but they don't really consider it a priority in certain cases for something that they'll go over for other things,
right?
But some things get left on the cutting board, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But as far as when you come into a project and you've worked with several directors, what do you expect from a director?
That's a good question. I think when I come onto a project, I expect a director to at least have an initial meeting with me. So I can ask them all the questions about the script, especially if they wrote the script, just get really clear on their vision. Like, I just expect time initially with them. And that time is so important because if I have that time, I can really get into their heads and understand like what the movie looks like, from their point of view and in their head. Because a lot of what you're doing is trying to understand the movie the director is trying to make. Because we don't see it until we see the final product, right? We're all on the same page where we're like, we kind of have an idea, but we don't really know until you really start getting into it. And you're like, oh, okay, so you like the color red, but not the color burgundy, or, you don't like lacy things because you think it's too feminine for this character. Like, you have to really get into the nitty gritty of it. So I usually expect like time from the director to have these conversations, and also just for them to be as clear as possible as they can, in terms of their vision. But some directors aren't as knowledgeable about clothes. So some directors will say, hey, I just want it to feel real. I don't want things to feel, costumey. I want it to feel lived in. And yeah, they'll say they want things to feel lived in and like worn, like real people. And then they'll say things like, but I don't really know clothes, so that's your thing, as long as it looks real. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I kind of have free reign to do my thing, just depending on what the color palettes are and what the production designers' limitations are in terms of environment and color. But yeah, like it just depends on the director. Some directors are like super hands-on and want to be really involved in the creative process and really want to have their hands on all the fabrics and all the, collaborate on sketches. Like there's some directors that are really, really hands-on. So it just depends.
Yeah, I mean, I know when we finish the show, we'll be able to splice in some of your work to kind of illustrate what you're talking about. Do you have a preference? It's like you run with it, we trust you, or
I read that.
Or they go over swatches and
So it's kind of a balance. Like I'd rather for someone to let me do my thing and trust me, but we still have checkpoints along the way.
Right, and then you bring this is what I've done so far.
Yeah,
they say
exactly.
keep going, or hey, let's circle back and XYZ.
Like I don't like when I work with a director that just like is just like lets me do whatever, and then I'm not hearing any communication from them, and then something comes on set or on camera, and they're like, I don't like this. Like, do you have something else? And it's like, well, I sent you the boards and I sent you the fitting photos and I didn't get a response, but they don't like it. So I have to come up with something else in the moment. That's really hard. So it's definitely a balance.
Yeah. I mean, and it just shows the spirit of how collaborative everything is. You know, there's no small jobs.
No.
And, costumes is one of the more important jobs, but I don't think people realize it until it doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the thing that a lot of people say about costumes is like, it should never take you out of the story. Like good costume design really enhances the characters, enhances the story, and it shouldn't take you out, in terms of like things being ill-fitting or just being like, that's not 70s, like that's 80s or 90s, like when that's, like you said, that's the only time people really will notice costume design if something is off or quote unquote bad. But as a costume designer, I know when those things happen, sometimes I can see why. I'm like, oh, that person didn't have enough resources or didn't have enough time, or maybe, the director wasn't clear with them or they weren't able to come to a consensus on like who the character is. Sometimes, the actor will be like, I don't want to wear that. I want to wear this. And you have to, fight to.
How do you negotiate something like that? Is it a highway or my way or the highway type thing, or?
I'm not really that person that's my way or the highway. I know people who are like that. I'm a little bit more diplomatic and I'm a little bit more apt to pull my resources in terms of getting support from the director, the producer, and helping to get, the actor to understand why this character would wear something like this. And that's that doesn't happen a lot. When it happens, it can be particularly challenging. And you do have to like stand your ground in a lot of ways and just be like, hey, here's the research. This is why the character is wearing this and that. And it's never about like, and then there's sometimes it's discussions about character or about fit, and those are completely reasonable. If someone's like, yo, I just feel fat in this, or I don't like how this makes me look. It's like, okay, let's look into the tailoring. Let's fix that. Let's fix the tailoring, but let's keep it within the period or within the concept, like that's what the fitting process is for. But then there's some times where like, an actor's having a hard time finding the character and, it can sometimes come out in the fitting room, and that's when it can be challenging.
Yeah. I mean, the more they can own it, the more they'll relax into what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And, like with the makeup and wardrobe, that helps facilitate that. Vonda Morris was on the show and she was talking about her process with Bass Reeves and just all the way down to like finding the right mustache and making it historically accurate.
Yes.
It's like, it's not a little one. No, you had the big handlebar mustache.
Yeah.
And that lets you slide into the character, whereas like you with the right hat on the character, they'll own it. And then that comes across on screen.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I remember when I did my first fitting with Lakeith for Judas and the Black Messiah, when I started putting him in like these like, late 60s era like ribbed sweaters and, bell-bottom pants and like wide belts with these like, decorative buckles. He like started walking completely different.
Yeah.
In the fitting, he started like, the boots, you know what I mean? Like the like Beetle boots, like he started walking completely different. And it was really cool to see him transform, in the fitting.
Yeah. I walk different when I get a new pair of pants from Old Navy. So I can't imagine if you dress me.
Gotta own it.
Gotta own it.
Yeah.
I was reading on your bio and you saw that you gave back a lot. And can you talk about the workshops that you've done with fashion design?
Yeah. So I'm currently looking for a new home for this program, but I did a couple years with the Boys and Girls Club in Cleveland, where I had a fashion sewing program for young kids from about 6 to 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was supporting the program, and, they would meet every Friday, and they would learn, some fashion concepts and learn basic sewing and things like that. And I was supporting the program, more financially than in person because it's in Cleveland. And the really awesome thing we got to do for the kids is take them on a trip to New York during Fashion Week. And we got to go to like the fashion district, and we met with like fabric vendors, and they showed us like, showed the kids how they like roll up the fabric on bolts and like different machinery. And, they got to pick swatches and, stuff like that.
I'm just trying to think. I don't want to talk about what's next.
Too good.
But how would you describe your style? We said, Charlese, what's your style?
I wrote this down and now I can't remember how I described it.
No, because when she came here, she came in this wonderful ensemble with the ballet tutu and she got the jewels and the hair and everything. This is like a whole visage.
Thank you.
This is a thing.
I mean, Afrofuturism is definitely an influence for me. The 90s is a huge influence, especially Gianni Versace's 90s aesthetics are big for me. It was funny, I was getting dressed today, and Reg, who did my makeup, he was like, "You're giving Carrie from Sex and the City." So definitely New York is a huge influence on my style. You know, like anything from my childhood has been a huge influence on my style. And also just being culturally Black and, you know, growing up in church and just the ostentatiousness of going to church and dressing for church, you know, and the idea of dressing.
It's a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. So like that's a huge part of like my personal influences. I'm also like very inspired by Japanese fashion and Japanese culture. That's a huge inspiration for me.
Have you been to Japan yet?
Yes, I've been to Tokyo twice.
Okay.
Love Tokyo. My niece told me the other day she wants to move there, and I was like, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I'm friends with one of the only African-American anime producers.
Oh, dope.
Yeah, I should connect you guys.
I would love that. Yeah, I love anime.
Yeah.
Definitely a huge style influence as well, for sure.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
We're running short on time, but if there's any words that you would like to impart to any young Charleses out there watching YouTube and they want to learn about costume design, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them it's okay to not have a traditional path. You know, I didn't have a traditional path. I didn't go to Yale, you know, for costume design. I didn't work my way up in the theater. I'm actually doing theater projects now. I'm now being called to do operas, which is really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So I say it's okay to not have a traditional career. Just really have the skills and know what you're doing. Like know how to make a pattern, even if it's not something you do on a regular basis. Know how to draw, know how to sew, know how to communicate with a tailor or, you know, an assistant or anyone that you're working with, how you want this garment to be sewn, how you need it to be altered. Like having the practical knowledge of how to do your job is so important. It's so important. Like I would say start there, like really know what you're doing and when it comes to garment construction and conveying your ideas.
Okay. I mean, and also be a nice person too. Goes a long way because relationships, it is a relationship driven business, whether we like it or not.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's always at the forefront. It's like, you know, be a good person. You know, at every stage of my career, I've helped people. So don't ever feel like you can't reach back or help out, you know, people, help your peers. You know, they say like network horizontally and not vertically, you know, like that helped me and propelled me in my career a lot, is networking that way, making art with my friends. I would say make art with your friends, make movies with your friends, make shorts with your friends.
And that's the tagline. I thank you for coming on to the show. It's been a wonderful education for me because that's the reason why I choose certain guests, because I want to learn more about what you do and how it contributes to the culture and to the art. So thank you so much. This has been a wonderful episode of Pan and Zoom. I'm your host, Sati Gossett. And until then, keep on filming.
Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable. Untouchable, uncrushable.